a Hollywood legend, a live studio audience, and one question that would crack the carefully constructed glass of daytime television wide open. What you are about to witness is not a scene from a movie. It is not a scripted drama or a rehearsed moment of manufactured emotion. What happened on that stage under those blazing studio lights in front of millions of viewers was real, raw, and completely unraveling. This is the story of the day a beloved actress walked onto a television set expecting a conversation and walked off having survived a war. This is the story of Joy Behar, of Julia Roberts, and of the moment that America finally saw what happens when you push a woman, any woman, too far. It was an ordinary morning in the world of daytime television, the kind of morning where production assistants rush around backstage with clipboards, where the studio audience files in with their coffee cups and their excitement, where makeup artists stab foundation onto famous faces and someone somewhere is double checking the cue cards. The View was in full pre-show preparation, and today's guest was no ordinary booking. Julia Roberts, Oscar winner, box office icon, and for 3 decades the undisputed sweetheart of American cinema, was walking through those studio doors. She arrived the way she always did, gracefully, warmly, that famous wide smile already in place, those eyes already dancing with the kind of easy charm that had made her one of the most recognizable women on the planet. The studio audience erupted the moment she appeared. They always did. She wore emerald green that day, flowing, elegant, her red hair catching the studio light as she crossed the set and settled into her chair with the ease of someone who had done 1,000 interviews and never once looked uncomfortable doing them. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed her with genuine warmth. Sarah Haynes leaned in with the enthusiasm of someone who had been a fan long before they shared a table. Sunny Hostin offered a gracious smile. The room felt good, the energy felt right, but then there was Joy Behar, sitting slightly back from the others, arms loosely crossed, a smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. She wasn't cold exactly, but she wasn't warm either. She was watching, studying, the way a chess player watches a board before making a move. No one in that studio could have known what was coming. Not the audience, not the production team, not Julia herself. The conversation began exactly as these conversations always do. Sarah asked about Julia's upcoming projects. Julia answered with the kind of humor and self-awareness that always made her interviews feel like catching up with a friend. Sunny inquired about family life. Julia's face softened immediately, the way it always does when someone brings up the people she loves most. The audience laughed. The hosts nodded. The cameras captured the glow of a perfectly pleasant celebrity morning segment, and Joy said nothing. She sat quietly through it all, watching, waiting. To a trained eye, it might have looked like patience. To those who knew her better, it might have looked like something else entirely. Then, without warning, like a stone dropped into still water, she spoke. "You know, Julia," Joy said, cutting across Sarah mid-sentence with a casualness that made the interruption feel almost offhand. "I've been watching your career for a long time, and I have to ask, don't you ever get tired of playing the same character over and over again?" The audience went still. Not the polite quiet of an attentive crowd, the frozen, held breath kind of silence that only happens when the air in a room suddenly changes temperature. Julia's smile faltered. Just for a second, just long enough for anyone paying close attention to notice. Then she recovered with the professionalism of 30 years in the public eye, laughing softly and responding with the measured grace of someone who had learned long ago how to handle an unexpected curveball. She had handled tougher rooms than this. Or so she thought. Joy was not finished. "Oh, come on," she pressed, leaning forward, now her voice sharpening at the edges. She began listing the pretty woman, the romantic lead, the girl next door with the big smile. "It's the same thing, different movie. Don't you think audiences deserve more from someone with your supposed talent?" Supposed talent. 2 words, quietly delivered, devastatingly precise. Whoopi shifted in her chair. The kind of involuntary movement that happens when a person's body registers alarm before their mind has fully caught up. She tried to intervene, gently, diplomatically, acknowledging Julia's range, her body of work, her decades of craft. Joy talked right through it. "What happens when America gets tired of sweet?" she asked. "What happens when they want something real?" There it was, the frame being built in real time. The premise being laid that Julia Roberts, this woman sitting 3 feet away from her, was not real, was not authentic, was not in some essential way enough. Julia's posture changed, subtly. The way a person's posture changes when they've decided to stop accommodating and start defending. I think my work speaks for itself, she said. Still calm, still measured. But something behind her eyes had shifted. And Joy, either not noticing or not caring, kept going. She said the word that would echo through the rest of the interview like a drumbeat. Privilege. She wanted to talk about privilege, about Julia's beauty, about being discovered young, about a life handed to her on a silver platter, about what someone who had lived so charmed in existence could possibly know about the real world. The world that everyone else, Joy implied, had to actually survive. The audience was completely silent now, not because they didn't have opinions, but because they could feel, collectively and instinctively, that something unprecedented was happening in front of them. Something that crossed a line that most people in that building didn't even know existed until Joy had just marched straight through it. Julia took a breath, a long one, the kind that a person takes when they are drawing on every resource they have: patience, professionalism, self control. Before they speak, she told Joy, clearly and without aggression, that she was making unfair assumptions, that Joy didn't know her journey, that the story Joy was telling about her was not the truth. Joy's response was a single, devastating line. From where I'm sitting, your biggest challenge has been choosing which mansion to live in. The gasp from the audience was audible, not laughter, not applause. A gasp, the involuntary kind. The kind that happens when a crowd collectively registers that someone has just done something they can't take back. Whoopi tried to step in again, more firmly this time. Joy cut her off. No, Joy said. I think it's time someone asked the hard questions. I think it's time someone called out this whole perfect princess act for what it really is. She paused. A carefully constructed lie. The room went cold. Julia's face had gone pale. Her voice, when it came, was controlled, but only barely, the way a wire is controlled when it's been pulled to its absolute limit. I've never pretended to be perfect, she said. Have you, though? Joy challenged. Or have you just fed the public the sanitized version of your life that your publicists approved? Camera operators adjusted their positions. There was a shift happening, something instinctive, professional, the feeling of people recognizing without being told that what they were capturing was significant. Julia said she had come to talk about her work, to connect with the audience, not to be attacked personally. Oh, is that what this is? Joy said, leaning back with the satisfaction that was almost theatrical. An attack? I thought this was just honest conversation. There's a difference, Julia replied, her voice beginning to show the first real signs of strain. There's a difference between honesty and cruelty. Joy laughed, that sharp, cutting laugh that had become its own kind of weapon over the course of this interview. Sweetie, she said, if a few honest observations hurt your feelings, maybe you're not as strong as you pretend to be. And something in Julia Roberts, the patience, the professionalism, the 30-year habit of grace under pressure, finally reached its limit. Strong, Julia repeated. The word came out slowly, quietly, the volume of someone who no longer needed to raise their voice to make themselves heard. You want to talk about strength, Joy? Let me tell you something about strength. Strength is sitting here and listening to you tear me down for no reason other than your own entertainment. Strength is not responding to your cruelty with cruelty of my own. Joy's eyes lit up. She called it fire, said she knew it was hiding under all that sweetness and light, asked how it felt to finally drop the act. This isn't an act, Julia said. This is me trying to maintain some dignity in the face of your unprovoked hostility. And then Joy did something that silenced the studio completely. She brought up the marriages, 3 of them, listed like evidence in a prosecution, held up against Julia's cinematic image of love and romance, of happy endings and fairy tales. Joy's implication was unmistakable, that the real Julia Roberts was a contradiction, a fraud, someone selling a product she didn't personally believe in. The audience gasped. Whoopi's expression shifted from discomfort to open shock. Joy, that's completely inappropriate, she said, her voice carrying the full weight of her authority. But Joy was past the point of redirection. Julia's hands were trembling now. Her voice, when she spoke, was compressed with a dozen different emotions fighting for space inside the same sentence. My personal relationships are exactly that personal. They have nothing to do with why I'm here today, but they have everything to do with who you are, Joy pressed. They show the gap between the image and the reality. The other hosts sat frozen, not because they agreed, but because they had no idea how to stop something that had taken on a momentum entirely its own. Julia stared at Joy for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. The strain was still there, but beneath it, something harder had appeared. Something that had been forged in exactly the kind of fire that Joy Behar had been insisting all along didn't exist. You want real, she said. You want to see something real? This is real, Joy. This hurt you're causing. This embarrassment you're putting me through in front of millions of people. This is real. Good, Joy said. Finally, some honesty. Finally, some genuine emotion instead of that calculated charm. And that was the moment. Not a scream, not a slamming door, not a tabloid headline's idea of a breakdown. Just a woman finally, quietly, deciding that enough was enough. Julia reached for her microphone, slowly, deliberately, the way a person moves when they have made a decision that they know is the right one and they are not going to be talked out of it. No, Joy said, her tone shifting just slightly, now that the consequences of everything she had set in motion were suddenly, physically in front of her. Don't be so dramatic. Sit down. We're just having a conversation. This isn't a conversation, Julia said. She looked at Joy directly. Her voice was quiet. Her eyes were clear. And what she said next was not an outburst. It was not theater. It was not the kind of line that gets written for movies. It was something far more powerful than any of that. It was just the truth. This is a character assassination, she said. This is you using your platform to bully someone, and I refuse to participate in it any longer. The word landed like a stone. Bully. For the first time since the interview began, something changed in Joy Behar's face. Something that looked, for just a moment, like the beginning of self-recognition. I am not a bully, she said. Her voice had gone defensive now, sharp, quick, the reaction of someone who had not prepared for the word to ever be applied to them. I've been doing this job for years, and I've never been called a bully. Then maybe, Julia said, it's time someone told you the truth. Whoopi stood up, reaching for some way to pull the situation back from the edge. She appealed to Julia, genuinely, warmly, asking her to stay, saying they could work it out. Julia looked at her with something almost like sadness. No, Whoopi, she said softly. We can't work this out. Some things can't be fixed with apologies or explanations. Some things are just wrong. She continued removing her microphone with steady hands. Joy, perhaps sensing for the first time that she was losing, not the argument, but something larger than the argument, tried to pivot, said she hadn't meant to hurt anyone, called it honest discussion. Julia turned to face her one last time. Joy, everything about this has been intentional. Every question, every insult, every attempt to make me look foolish or fake, you came into this with an agenda, and that agenda was to tear me down. That's not true, Joy said. But her voice had gone quiet. And quiet was not something Joy Behar did often. Isn't it? Tulia asked. Then explain to me why every single thing you've said to me has been designed to hurt. Explain to me why you seem to be enjoying my discomfort so much. The studio held its breath. Joy said she was a journalist, said it was her job to ask hard questions. Julia shook her head. You're not a journalist right now, Joy, she said. You're a bully, and I've spent too many years of my life dealing with bullies to sit here and let you continue. She was almost at the edge of the set when Joy called after her. Don't you walk away from me, Joy said. We're not finished here. Julia paused. She turned back. One last time. And the look on her face in that moment, it was not anger. It was not triumph. It was something quieter and somehow more powerful than either of those things. It was the look of someone who had decided finally and completely that they owed nothing more to this moment than what they were about to say. Yes, we are, she said simply. We're very much finished. And she walked off the set of The View. The cameras kept rolling. They always do. Joy Behar stood at the table for a long moment, breathing harder than she probably realized, looking at the empty chair where Julia had been sitting. The studio audience remained frozen in their seats, not buzzing yet, not reacting the way crowds react when something goes as expected, just sitting in the particular stunned silence of people who had just watched something they could not quite categorize. Slowly, Joy sank back into her chair, and across the table, Whoopi Goldberg looked into the camera with an expression that said everything no one in that studio had the words for just yet. "We'll be right back after this break," she said. Her voice was steady, but the warmth was gone, and everyone watching, in the studio, at home, in the offices and living rooms and school cafeterias where the view played in the background of ordinary American mornings, could hear the absence of it. The show cut to commercial, and the conversation that followed, in comment sections and group chats, on morning radio programs and entertainment news segments, lasted for days. There is a particular kind of cruelty that hides itself behind the language of honesty. It borrows the vocabulary of truth-telling. It cloaks itself in the idea of asking hard questions, of cutting through the performance, of demanding something real from people who make their living in the spotlight. It can sound to a certain ear like accountability, but there is a test for whether something is honest or simply cruel. Does it illuminate or does it diminish? Does it ask a question in genuine search of an answer? Or does it ask a question that has already decided its own answer, a question designed not to understand, but to wound? What happened on The View that morning was not a journalist doing her job. It was not a provocateur bravely challenging a narrative. What it was, in its plainest and most honest form, was a person with a microphone and a platform deciding that another person's dignity was less important than the entertainment value of watching them be stripped of it. And Julia Roberts, in that moment, not as America's sweetheart, not as a brand or a product or a manufactured image, but as a human being who had reached her limit, chose not to perform her way through it. She chose not to smile. She chose not to deflect. She chose not to give that moment the performance it was demanding of her. She simply chose to leave, and in doing so, she reminded every person watching, every woman who has ever been expected to absorb cruelty with grace, every person who has ever been told that standing up for yourself is being dramatic, that the most powerful thing you can sometimes say to someone who is trying to make you feel small is not an argument. It is two words: we're finished.